This week, Danny Miller of Ericom Software joins us to talk about browser isolation. Larry Pesce and Galen Alderson deliver a demo on a project they were working on. That's what it says. What is the demo about, Larry?
Vapor Trail.
Vapor Trails. Is that like crop dusting but different?
Yes.
Okay. And they give that talk at DEF CON. We're going to probably talk about Hacker Summer Camp and probably tell a lot of inside jokes and stories. So just preparing you for that. And then it says insert stories here. Oh, and then we'll talk about security news. All that and more, so stay tuned. This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Brought to you by Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. The SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security certification training and research. Visit SANS.org to explore their full curriculum and latest training offerings. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who loves being the unwitting participant in a Smelfie. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 524. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian. Excited to be here, as always, on Paul's Security Weekly. Yeah. The show that started it all for us in the podcasting world.
So 524 episodes ago.
524 episodes. Larry Pesce is here in studio.
Yes,
Feels like he was on episode 1 and probably
many in between.
85 or 87%.
Maybe even more.
Maybe even more. Episodes in between.
Yep.
What's going on?
Same shit, different day. So do you know what a Smelfie is?
I was afraid to ask, and I was really hoping that wouldn't come up.
So, in order to take a Smelfie.
I was really hoping we could save
So in order to take a Smelfie, you have to fart. And then take a picture, a selfie with the person who smelled your fart and their reaction. Riley apparently enjoys it.
I'd like to welcome our other lovely hosts on the show. Jeff Mann is here with us. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Smelties makes me think of Mark for some reason.
It does.
Oh my God,
it does. So what's going on, roomie? Jeff was my roomie at for DEF CON.
We were roommates in Vegas.
It was fun. It was awesome.
Hey, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
That's right.
And if it doesn't, it can be cleared up by a very good prescription from your doctor.
Except for Joey. Props to Joey, our waiter at dinner at the top of the world in the stratosphere.
Did he not stay in Vegas?
I wish he would come home with us because he was so awesome. Best waiter ever. Best waiter ever. Yes.
Ever.
Joff, you missed the greatest waiter ever because you didn't come with us to Black Hat or DEF CON. I apologize about that.
I know.
We could have been roommates. The offer was out there, and Jeff, he trumped you. So could have been you. Just saying.
Yeah, I know, and I appreciate it, and I'm glad you enjoyed your spooning with Jeff. But,
Hey, that stays in Vegas.
And either way, whoever's name you screamed out in the middle of the night, you're probably pretty close.
Jeff or Joff, same difference.
Yeah, okay.
I had an announcement. I have announcements on my I do have my teleprompter. What is my brain? What is when you get back from a conference like you have brain scramble?
Con brain.
Yeah, con brain. Thank you. ITPro.tv/security weekly. Use the discount code SW30. Try it free. And by it, I mean there's this exciting new thing that they're doing. Have you heard about this, Larry? Mm-mm. So they've got this thing for, what do they call it? It's the supervisor portal. So like if you work for a business and the business buys a subscription, they still get the money off that we have, 30% off monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. But you can go buy that. Your company can go buy that and then give accounts to all the employees. You can track their progress. You can assign training modules and kind of manage their training and learning experience. Now, what I've cautioned people about is like, don't yell at your employees for not doing training. It probably means you just haven't given them enough time.
Right.
But I thought that was really cool. I like the part where you can assign training modules. Like, I think this person should take this training, assign it to them, and track their progress, and work with your employees to get them trained up. I think that's awesome. Yeah. So make sure you check that out. All right. Patiently waiting because we got a late start, and I apologize. Danny Miller from Ericom Software is here with us. Danny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot. Nice being here.
Yes, it's nice to have you. So you are the Director of Product Marketing, and you also have a bachelor's degree in behavioral science and a master's in psychology. That's awesome. I'm told Jeff is going to talk with you about that, about such matters. But we're really here today to talk about isolated browsing. And so, Danny, just kind of put it in perspective for our listeners. What do we mean by isolated browsing, and what's the problem we're trying to solve?
Great. So when we talk about we look at the enterprises and we look at what employees are trying to do, and pretty much they're trying to browse the internet. So whether they do it for their leisure or whether they're doing it because they actually need to do their job, doing research, doing training, like you just mentioned, they're browsing the internet. And as we know, if you look at the current attack vector through which malware and exploits are penetrating the enterprise, it's clearly that the browser is the weakest link. So in that sense, you want to try and address the browsing experience. On the one hand, give your employees a positive browsing experience, a native one. But on the other hand, you want to make sure you protect the organization from all these potential hazards. So browser isolation actually means that you're going to let your users browse, but they're going to do it using a virtual browser. Now,
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So how do we accomplish this isolation in the browser? Obviously, there's operating system protections, but they don't quite, they fall short of the mark of isolation. So what are some of the techniques for actually isolating the browser?
Right. So the way it works is that when you look at the current products that are doing all kinds of network detection and prevention, they are all, whether they're a signature-based or other type of solutions, they're all focusing on identifying the malware and then blocking it. When we talk about browser isolation, we actually shy away from saying that this kind of traffic is good and the other traffic is bad. So we're kind of going away from all this white and black listing, and we basically say we don't know what it is. And as a result, we want to enable a secure browsing. Now, the way it works is that the user requests to browse. It goes through an organizational proxy. The proxy determines whether it's, again, right or wrong, whitelisted or blacklisted. But the default of the system is that it goes through secure browsing. Secure browsing meaning that we actually have a dedicated container, many containers that are available in the DMZ. So we have a pool of browsers sitting in a server in the DMZ, and they are the one doing all the heavy lifting. So as a user, you request, let's say I want to go to CNN.com for some reason, and the virtual browser inside the container is going to do the browsing for you. And the information from that virtual browser that resides, again, outside, away from the local area network and away from the endpoint, this virtual browser is going to do all the heavy lifting, and the information is going to be rendered back to the end users. This really means that nothing is running on the end code, no code, no nothing. And in the case that there is any particular malware that is trying to penetrate, it actually remains in this disposable container. Now, these containers are, again, they're temporary, so they're just executed based on a request for browsing, and at the end of the session, after a certain idle time, they just explode. So there's no remains of that browsing session. So that means any potential malware that may have been accumulated in this session is actually now discarded.
So when you say it gets rendered back to the user, does it get rendered back to me as an image or static HTML, or is that like configurable?
Right. So actually, it's all images. So the user is getting a visual flow of images, and because we have the know-how and the expertise, the user gets a native user experience. They don't even know that on one tab they've been surfing using a regular browsing, while a different tab they've been using a virtual browser. So it really looks exactly the same, and we render the information in a picture mode.
So what happens if I need to fill out a form?
That was going to be my question.
Well, first of all, you have to do it very cautiously. But everything works exactly the same as for any experience using a web browser. So we know how to, in cases, let's give an example. If you want to go and use a certain cookie, or you're going to your Google Drive, or you want to try and fill up your details somewhere, as you said, filling up a form. So we have a way of checking those credentials, making sure the information is passing only in a text mode, and as a result, nothing malicious can actually go back from the virtual browser into the local browser.
So this protects against things such as cross-site scripting, correct?
Yeah, but not just that. I mean, you can think about phishing attacks. If you're trying to do phishing, and the phishing is done actually in the container, and the user is now, let's say, a drive-by download that came out as a result of going into a certain site. All these things are actually remain in the secure container, and at the end of the session, they disappear. So there are a couple of these types of malware that are handled.
So it's not going to protect against any kind of credential stealing, right?
Right. So when you talk about spear phishing, again, if the user ended up clicking, let's take a real life scenario. User is getting an email from someone who's so-called, CEO of the company, and they click the link. Based on how the system is set up, as I said, the default of the system is if it's not blacklisted or whitelisted, then it's going to be open in Ericom Shield as a virtual browser. So if there's any malware on this website, it's going to be contained. However, if the user has been tricked to actually put in credentials, I guess, unfortunately, this is where we stop. This is where we can't really help the user.
Gotcha. Jeff, I'm sorry. Larry, did you have a question?
No, I was going to ask about the form field stuff.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's pretty cool. So are you able to pull any of the malware off of those containers for analysis?
Right. So again, the as a philosophy, using isolation is really all about saying we don't want to play the game of what's right and what's wrong, because all you need to do is you need to make one mistake, and then the malware can penetrate. So instead of saying this is maybe a good website or a bad website, all we do is say we don't know, and as a result, we're just going to keep it in isolation. That's the concept of secure browsing using isolation.
I got you. So you're not detecting if it's bad or not. So you don't know if you need to preserve a container to do some kind of analysis.
Exactly. Let's look at what's happening right now in the industry. If you're using, an antivirus, or you're using a secure web gateway, or any of the other, or even a firewall, I mean, you need to have some information saying this one is a good one, this one is a bad one. If an employee just been on a week vacation and you're late to install the latest updates, then you got yourself a walking vulnerability. So because right now, when you look at the defense in-depth strategy of all the organizations, they have a pile of products that are doing, each one of them is doing something. What we see browser isolation as another layer in this defense in-depth strategy. So we actually cover that aspect of, the human factor of users just clicking a link. Now, maybe one more thing to mention is when you go into any innocent-looking website and you're just going to look at the page source, you're probably going to see hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of code, of lines of code. Some of them being malvertising, some of them being, JavaScript running, all kinds of other things that are happening in the background. When you actually do right-click and check the view source in an Ericom Shield website, that means the virtual browser, you're going to get very few lines, which are really the lines calling the rendering engine. So no code is running on the endpoint, and this is why browser isolation is so powerful.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's good.
Yep.
What about for things that need to make calls out to the web, like for an API or software that needs to get software updates that has to actually parse the results coming back from a particular website? Is that stuff that needs to be whitelisted?
So some of the solution, some of the web pages, like you described, may need to be whitelisted initially, but we have certain mechanisms that help us identify and transfer cookies between sites, and as a result, kind of verify that the site is safe to use. Also, a lot of the websites now are using HTTPS. So when using HTTPS, obviously with the built-in encryption, some of these updates are actually quite safe.
Some of my other questions, I have so many questions, like, how do you do that? The other one's like, how do I watch a YouTube video if it's doing rendering somewhere else?
Okay, that's really how the magic happens, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good opportunity just to give a couple of pointers about Ericom and who we are.
Yeah.
The company has been, for about been operating in more than 20 years in the fields of secure remote access and virtualization. As part of that process, as part of the know-how in the company, we actually developed HTML5 client. I would say 6-7 years ago. So we were pretty much the first one to the market with a solid HTML5 type of solution. So with our remote secure access solution, we have tens of thousands of devices in the field that are already using that kind of technology. Coming from a virtualization background, we know a few things about how to deliver, how to create those virtual browsers, and how to do the rendering in an efficient way. And as a result, now when you're going on Ericom Shield and you try it out and you're looking at the videos, it's quite amazing to see how smooth it is. Audio synchronized, video looking great, also in HD. And the R&D team is really working very hard in making sure that this is transparent to the user. Because at the end of the day, for this solution to work, users need to be totally unaware of what's happening in the background.
Yep.
And that's a challenge.
Yep. Now, speaking of sort of being unaware, I know that there's those wonderful developers out there that design their sites for Internet Explorer only, and you mentioned some containerization. How do you deal with some of the containerization that requires a specific browser engine to operate?
Right. Because we are using HTML5, basically any browser that uses HTML5 is going to be fine. We don't really care which device or which browser you're going to use as long as it's HTML5, and we do the magic, in the background. So we actually have a specific engine that we're using in the container, but from the user perspective, it doesn't matter. We just deliver the same experience whether you're using your Mac now using Chrome or whether using your Windows laptop with Internet Explorer.
Okay.
How difficult is it to tune those containers so that they can accurately render other websites so if a website requires this technology or this particular browser, like do you emulate different browsers from the container itself?
No, we actually do all the rendering on the server side, right? As I said, there's a server running in the DMZ. What we do is we have actually a pool of containers. So when you think about user experience, as soon as the user is hitting on a URL, it doesn't need to wait for a browser. There is a pool of browser waiting for the user, and all we do is just create the connection between that browsing session and the virtual browser who's doing the actual browsing and the rendering. So it really doesn't matter from our perspective.
So in your virtual browser, if the site's requesting Internet Explorer, do you have the kind of smarts in that virtual browser to emulate Internet Explorer, for example?
We are using Linux as our Linux containers and Linux as an operating system, but we do have the tricks to make sure that it looks okay on Internet Explorer as well.
Excellent. And I'm thinking like, man, this is great, and this very much sounds like an enterprise solution. How can I get this for my wife and kids at home?
Yeah.
Like seriously, like have you considered potential home market or consumer market for something like this?
Yeah, definitely, and we actually heard it from different kinds of analysts and others. But I have to admit that right now our focus is on the enterprise. We're about to launch the product in a matter of weeks. We already have that product in place as part of our first generation, which is based on a Microsoft technology, and we're kind of doing now our second generation. And as soon as we're going to get comfortable in the field with all the right companies buying into it, then we will definitely look at the household market, because it's very clear that you can protect your computer at home and all the different devices, and we can blame our kids for hitting on all the wrong links, but that's true also for adults. So if we can just try to save the world with hitting on the wrong links, that would be great.
Dan, what's the underlying container technology? Is it like CoreOS with Docker, or is it some other kind of container technology?
I'd say the latter. So it's more of using Docker technology, and on top of this, building using a specific Linux operating system that we trim down, make sure it's a very lenient and efficient Linux with a browser, and that's about it. So
that's the secret sauce, Paul.
You have to remember that because this is an enterprise-wide solution, and because Monday morning 9 a.m. people are probably going to be firing up 5, 10, 15 different tabs on their computers, you have to be ready to scale. And that means that there's a lot of dynamic, a very dynamic system with the browser going up and down, and people shutting down and moving up and down. So you got to be very, very effective in how you manage your pool of browsers. And we do a lot of, I would say, acting balances, checks and balances to make sure that we always provide the best user experience, that they won't be in a situation where, hey, there's not enough browser for you. Right. Because I don't know what situation you're in, but I have like probably 15 browsers tabs open right now on my laptop, and every tab is a virtual browser, right? Because we want to make sure there's no leakage between sessions. So every tab is a virtual browser.
Yep. It's
You always have that one window that has like 25 tabs open, and like you forget that window's there, and you just create like 2 new windows with all the tabs open, and you're like, why is my browser running so slow?
And where did those other tabs go?
Yeah.
Where did those other tabs I had
where's
open
that
go?
website I was on?
Yeah, yeah. It's very much the Shmoocon ticket sales problem.
Yes.
It's like, the Shmoocon website runs great all year long until they go to do ticket sales, and they have 500,000 people trying to hit their website all within this 3-minute period.
Yeah.
So
I have a couple of questions real quick.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So one is how do you deal with the situation when the browser user wants to download some sort of content like a PDF or some sort of zip file or something like that? And the second question is, have you done any studies over the long term as to the impact on the client side? Is your technology actually lighter weight in terms of resource utilization and overall efficiency on the client side?
Okay, great questions. Thanks for that. So first of all, as you clearly stated, part of the user experience is the ability to download files, and we know that. That means that as part of the process, if let's say you're browsing now on a certain website and you want to download a file, the file is going to be downloaded into this container. We are actually, we can connect to any sanitization solution that the organization has, and with all the organization that we speak in on the financial and banking and health, they most of them have something in place. But our solution also come built in with a third-party sanitization solution. And what I mean by sanitization, it has actually 2 angles. One is a multi-scanning engine that checks the file. The other one, which is more sophisticated, is what's called content disarm and reconstruction. Actually taking the file down, breaking it into pieces, eliminating any potential code or malware that may reside within, and recreate the file according to, let's say if it's Adobe, according to PDF standards. Only when this process is complete, only then the user can actually download the file to the endpoint. Until then, all this process is happening in the virtual browser, in the remote container. And again, it's in the DMZ, so nothing is penetrating the organization until it's get the okay that yes, this file is safe to use. So I know that right now when you speak to users, they are okay with waiting, sometimes a couple of minutes even for a file to be cleaned out, saying, Big Brother is making sure that your file is going to be safe. So people it's okay for them to expect it. It's not okay to expect when you browse the internet and say, well, we're not sure if this site is blacklisted or whitelisted. Give us a minute to check it. That's not acceptable. But downloading a file, that's okay to wait. So that's in terms of the file sanitization. And again, one of the advantages of our solution is we know that there are small and medium-sized organizations who do not have that kind of a solution in place, and that's why we embed it as part of our solution, so they get not only the secure, isolated browsing, but also the download of the file. As for your second question regarding the number of browsers and how they clog the system or they don't, it really is all about managing the resources and making sure that after a certain period of time, browser are being or containers are being exploded and recreated from again. And it's very important also to understand that, as I said, the system is very dynamic. So if you have, for example, as I said, this example of Monday morning 9 a.m., there might be a chance that the idle time is going to be a little bit shorter, right? Because we know that there's a lot of traffic, but say around lunchtime, it's less of an issue because the resources are available. At the end of the day, it's a lot of the decision at the enterprise level. They need to decide how much resources they're willing to give the remote browsing to make sure that users can really browse freely, or they're going to say, hey, We like to limit this. So we have all those business logic embedded in the product, and what comes a certain threshold, we know how to manage the ups and downs.
Danny, how do you handle SSL? Is it similar to way proxy servers would, I believe, the way they handle it today? In other words, I get a trusted certificate from the proxy server, and then the proxy server does the validation of all the sites I go to?
Exactly. So, but what we do is we actually using ICAP, which is a protocol very common in the industry, and we actually place our ICAP right after the proxy. So we use the ICAP to really execute the organizational proxy policy, and based on the decision, I mean, you might actually even have a firewall before the proxy, and then the proxy, and maybe even a proxy afterwards. So we'd like to be the last point before you go into the outside world. And after all the policies have been executed, this is where we're going to decide whether you go directly to the internet, whether you're being blocked, or whether you're going to be getting an Ericom Shield virtual browser.
Do you act as your own proxy, or are you mostly in the business of partnering using ICAP with other proxy solutions?
So we've been talking to many customers and prospects. Most of the organizations that we speak to already have a proxy in place. And in such cases, we just come with our ICAP solution and handle this. Some organizations that do not have proxy, we provide the proxy as well. So our solution have a proxy embedded, standard proxy, and we can just disable it in those cases where the organization already have a proxy built in, which is most of the cases.
Oh, so both. That's great. That's good to hear.
Well, you gotta be flexible. You don't want to tell the customer, hey, you haven't been using a proxy, so we can't really help you. You got to find a way to really hook up to what the industry is looking for. And ICAP right now is probably the most common protocol to connect between those pieces.
Right.
How does the product provide, or in any isolated browsing situation, like how do I get feedback as to how I'm doing? In other words, like how do I measure success and know that it's successfully protected, some of my users?
Okay. At the end of the day, as I said, we are not checking whether you've just been hit by a malware or not. We're just making sure that the session is always away from you. Now, that's again, this is probably some sort of a measure that we need to put in the system to make sure that if a malware did try to penetrate, we can just kind of collect and say, hey, one malware down in this container. But right now we don't do it. We just look at it as a black box and saying if something wrong is here, if something's wrong here, we don't know, but we don't care. That's pretty much the philosophy. We do have a very extensive log system that tracks everything, from all the connections and the number of browsers and idle time and how many times you were browsing and where. But specifically identifying a malware, this is exactly what we're trying not to do, because as we see in the industry, this is where most companies at some point in time fail to say, hey, I missed that specific malware, and as a result, I've been hit by a WannaCry or anything else.
I got you. So this would ride on top of any kind of browser protections that I've put in place? Like what if I run some kind of ad blocker or something in my browser? Does that just kind of work before it goes up to your system?
Exactly. And again, I can't really say that everything that you have right now you need to ditch and just use secure browsing and browser isolation, and you're good to go. We know that you need to have different types of products that address the hazards of browser-borne threats different ways. So definitely, you want to have whatever you're currently using. This would be an additional layer that's going to do the trick. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's interesting. We're going to talk about it in our stories tonight, about some of the history behind advertising on websites and Google's attempts to put in advertising blocks natively inside the browser. And there were some interesting things in there about sites like Forbes and Wired. I think it was Forbes that said, well, if you've got an adware blocker on your browser, then you have to register and pay us, or register and not pay us, something like that, to have an ad-free experience. And as soon as right after they did that, they had some kind of malvertising campaign hit their system. So if you had disabled your ad blocker, you actually got owned going to the site, unless you had a secure browsing solution which prevent that kind of behavior. So I think it's highly effective at stopping those kind of attacks, which are hard to trace down, certainly.
Yeah, it's hard to put your thumb on, here I'm being attacked right now, simply because really, I mean, people just browse, and the number of open sessions that are happening, in a company at any given moment are just impossible to trace. So you just want to make sure that you're taking an approach which is a little bit more unique, which is really looking at more holistically at, I just don't want to deal with it. Let's put it aside and let it play in a safe manner. So that's really how we look at secure browsing.
Danny, where do the cookies reside? Are you handling the cookies on your container and just passing back the result? Like, are you building those cookies and maintaining them for the user, or are some cookies passed back to the user's browser?
So we are maintaining the cookies on the end user browser. However, the first time when you going into a new site, we do bring back a cookie, but we remember them. So that's, for example, the reason why if you open a tab on Google Doc and another one on Gmail, from a user side, it's going to be totally transparent. They're not going to do any login or anything like it.
Right.
But yeah, we have to pass cookies. But by the way, we have a kind of straightforward management web admin that you can take some decisions. And the decision is based on, I don't want to enable cookies from this particular site. Mm-hmm. So, and that's also a possibility.
I gotcha.
So we do enable this granularity, but most option we know that cookies are really, really required, because if you want to maintain the user experience, the native user experience, you kind of have to have those cookies intact.
So now, is each individual connection to the site, does that get its own container, or does my browser get its own container?
No, every tab, every URL that you're going to click is going to be firing up a dedicated container and inside a virtual browser.
So in that respect, cross-site request forgery attacks don't exist on your platform, provided the containers can't talk to each other, correct?
Exactly. The containers are totally separate. That's exactly why the reason, because as you can imagine, as the R&D team were putting together the thoughts around, how should it work? There were some thoughts of saying, okay, one user is browsing, it's one container. And then we realized that this leakage is something too dangerous, and we need to separate and isolate each one of the sessions, because you can never know where the malware resides.
So to a certain extent, cross-site scripting attacks can get at whatever's inside that container, potentially, correct?
Yeah, they're going to be hitting the container, and that's about it. And then the container is just going to go away, and with it, the attack. So
it's somewhat limiting. I don't know if Joff or Larry or Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhat limiting to cross-site scripting attacks, because you can't get at you can't execute code in the user's browser.
Well, you
your microphone's up on your head.
Sorry, you can execute code in the user's browser. I had to cough, so I put that up there.
It's in the container.
You're right, but it's in the container, and it's only got access to what the container has access to.
Which is just that one website.
Which is that one website. So that's pretty damn cool.
That is pretty cool.
It is pretty cool, and I think it's elegant. It's really keeping the users unaware of the fact that they're now not jeopardizing the organization by going to all kind of funny websites.
Funny. I like the way you put that.
Awesome. Any more questions for Danny?
I have none.
Sweet. Danny, thank you so much for appearing on Security Weekly and sharing with us knowledge about isolated browsing. I was always kind of curious how it worked without installing a client on the user's workstation. So now we have the answer.
And now we have a very elegant answer.
Containers for the win. Thank you so much, Danny, for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a great evening, and speak to you again soon.
Thank you. You will. And with that, we're going to take a short break, come back, and Larry and intern Galen are going to do a technical segment. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.